at this point in time aligned to a country like Russia, also at the same time aligned to the United States of America. And the Al Jama Party press release talks about America not being offended by South Africa's support for Russia. And we are joined on the line this morning by the Member of Parliament and also the leader of the Al Jama Party, Ganief Hendricks. Ganief, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yes, Ganief, obviously looking at this conflict that is taking place right now, looking at South Africa, what South Africa's position is, and the Al Jama Party has issued this press release about America not being offended by South Africa's support for Russia. If you could just tell us or give us some background as to the basis of this press release and the statement that has been issued by the Al Jama Party.
Thank you very much. I thought we will release the press statement. I'm a member of the Portfolio Committee on International Relations, and all the members were invited for a briefing and a lunch at the Cape Town office of the Embassy of the United States of America at the invitation of Clinton Tad Brown, who is the counselor to the ambassador for political affairs. And so present at the meeting were the ACDP and the Democratic Alliance and ourselves, because I wanted to use the opportunity to highlight the fact that the comprehensive action that was taken as a result of the invasion and occupation of parts of Ukraine by Russia, and how countries all over the world rally together, especially those close to NATO, to deal with what some people call crimes against humanity, war crimes. And I attended to make the point that the same reaction should apply with regard to the atrocities committed in Palestine. At the meeting, earlier in the morning, the Democratic Alliance was pushing the narrative that South Africa should use its vote in the General Assembly of the United Nations against Russia, and I took the opportunity to tell the group that I'm glad to hear that the Democratic Alliance puts a lot of weight to the decisions of the General Assembly of the United Nations. And as you know, no one has a veto right. And if a resolution is adopted, there is a moral responsibility on all the countries to carry out that resolution. So why the double standards? There are so many resolutions declaring Israel a pariah state, and why is the same respect not given to those resolutions? But now the DA is asking South Africa to vote in a certain way, and suddenly now giving a lot of credibility to the United Nations resolutions. I also mentioned the fact that there are a lot of apartheid sleeper cells, and that there are opposition political parties that may want to use this opportunity if America decides to take action against South Africa to bring about regime change. And it is in that context that the councillor said, the councillor stated that, look, what South Africa's position is hardly creates a wave in America. It is not a topic of discussion. There is no concern. In fact, they welcome any criticism from South Africa because it just helps with the democratic process. And he mentioned that in spite of South Africa's position today, America still has a high regard for South Africa's democracy, for the country, for the governing party. So basically, a motion of confidence in the governing party, in the government, in spite of all these problems, and that obviously irked the official opposition to hear that in spite of America, in spite of South Africa taking a stand that the DA doesn't want on the Ukraine, you find that it doesn't really worry America. And we were also told later in the day that is a telephone call between the president that has been set up with the Secretary of State of America. And it was just to share each views. And America has no quarrel, absolutely no quarrel with how South Africa wants to deal with the invasion. I also made a point that Ukraine, that they want to be part of NATO, and this and engineered all that is happening in order to speed up their membership of NATO. But America has made it clear that they won't send boots on the ground, even if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO. So it looks like Ukraine won't be succeeding. And this gives a different view of how we feel about America. And, we are worried about regime change, that America will now, we know that the governing party is weak, ANC is weak. The last volume of the Zondo Commission has been released, implicating another dozen senior ANC people. So if America takes action against countries that support Russia, and for example, in the case of South Africa, bring about regime change, the response of Clinton Brown obviously also urged the DA, if they are interested in the regime change. And we know there are a lot of apartheid sleeper cells waiting for opportunity to retake the country and to reverse the case that we had in 1994.
Yes, Ganief. And, I hear what you're saying, and I hear what Clinton Brown has been saying. But at the end of the day, as much as America, saying what they want to with regard to South Africa and the South African position on this conflict, but America talking about, obviously NATO, and we're talking about Ukraine becoming a part of NATO. The key issue here is America, through Europe and NATO, had basically engineered COVID operations in Ukraine, where they installed this pro-West president in the form of Zelensky, who we know is a Zionist who has served as a supporter of apartheid Israel in its suppression of the people of Palestine. They were part of the US-led war on terror together with NATO in Iraq as well, and some of the other conflicts around the world. So on the one hand, America may be saying, yes, South Africa, we respect your position, but at the end of the day, we see it, and yesterday even at the United Nations, where the US representative to the United Nations came out very, very strongly against some of these issues, talking about the killing of innocent people, killing of babies by the Russians, yet the Americans themselves have been guilty of a lot of this in countries like Iraq. We see what has happened in Libya and also in Afghanistan.
Yeah, no, I think you've summarized it very well. And on several occasions, I make the point that without discussing the merits of the invasion by Russia, because we don't support war, we don't support the killing of women and children and the elderly, no matter which country it is, no matter how we differ with those countries, we cannot support that from a humanitarian aspect. However, this conflict has shown that something can be done to bring Israel to its knees and end the occupation. Just imagine these same countries honoring the resolutions of the General Assembly do the same to Israel. Then the conflict, the occupation will come to an end. The attack on Masjid al-Aqsa will come to an end. And just by the way, in Parliament yesterday, a motion was passed to support Al-Aqsa Week. I think this is the first time that, such a support for Aqsa has been made in the South African Parliament. And there were no objections to the motion and it was carried. But coming back to Ukraine, the issues that we talked about is fine. But, we cannot support the war and the killing of women and children and the elderly. And so it is a very sad day, should be a very sad day for everyone because of the many lives that are lost. But the civilized world has shown that it can use, for example, sanctions and the measures. And this was an opportunity to perfect it. And I asked the Councillor Clinton Tad Brown that he must, America must use and the West must use the same measures against Israel. And he said, well, he agrees that any crimes against humanity, war crimes, that everyone must stand up. And certainly America will stand up, but he admitted that America has double standards. He's slow to act when it comes to Israel. And he says, continue to criticize us, continue to condemn us. So that's why we released the press statement.
Well, Buddha Ganief, Jazakallah khairan so much for that. And as always, for your time, shukran to you. We wish you well, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ganief Hendricks, the leader of the Jama-ah party with us this morning. The time is just gone 8:52. We come back. It's the weekly edition of Crime Talk with Imtiaz Sayed.
Shema Spa.